Hello, Flower Essence friends. Welcome back to the Flower Essence podcast with Rochana and Kathleen Aspens. And we're here today to talk about another cheery subject. Last month, we dived into toxic shame. So this month, we're also kind of working in this realm of looking at things that might be bothering us this time of year, and that is depression or depressed states. And when we talk about that, I want to make sure that we're referring to more of the situational depression, seasonal, temporary, low mood, all of these forms that can just make you feel the blues and act also lead to clinical depression if left unchecked too long, but we're not dealing with clinical depression and want to just make sure that that is something left to the professionals. And this is all, it's all related, but let's dive into what it even means to have depression or to feel depressed. Are you ready for this, Kathleen?
Yeah. Well, this time of year, and I'm speaking, we're in mid-November here. And I always notice in myself that I have a dip in my mood when the leaves all start falling off the trees. And even as beautiful as it is, as beautiful as the fall season is, and I'm looking outside, I've got a maple that's just, it's just so gorgeous right now, beautiful leaves. And yet this season is so emotionally challenging for me. I know some people love fall. So I'm like, I wish I was you, but I don't. The light changes and it really affects my mood. It really affects kind of how I feel inside. And I think essences can be a great support for all of us who have this. There's a lot of people who have seasonal mood changes or get impacted by the seasons. And there's a lot we can do about it. And I think we're going to dive in a little bit to the different types of behavioral shifts that you can create in yourself, and then we can get into the essences. But we wanted to talk too about the some of the qualities of what we're talking about when we're talking about sort of a non-clinical depression. And I think that's probably a good starting place. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's an internally generated depression, and that is more of the body or the chemistry, the physical reaction to less light in the year. It also can be caused by lack of sleep or a poor diet. There's so many physical factors. Even they're tracing it now to the microbiome in the gut being a huge part of what can be a factor in depression. But then there's also externally generated circumstances. And those are more the things that are something happened at work, things that are happening in your relationships, things that are happening in the world and the news and the media. So there's a lot of stuff coming at you, and those can lead to depression. And so what I love, and Kathleen, you're the one who introduced me to the work of Carla McLaren, and I'm just such a big fan now. She has a book called The Language of Emotions, and what she calls depression is a brilliant stop sign for the soul, or an ingenious stop sign. And it's like a cue to start pay attention to what's going on with your life, with your lifestyle, and also around you, to see what it is that is causing these feelings, and maybe there's something that you can do to alleviate them.
Completely agree. Her work is so defining of our emotions and so accepting of our emotions. What she has brought to the world of emotional awareness and emotional appreciation is really great. And I want to just add a piece that a lot of times culturally we see ourselves as we should be like joyous all the time. We should be happy and everything should be great. And, and if it's not, we fake it. And social media, I think, has been kind of a real problem in that it reinforces this. And when we're sitting there looking at it and our lives are not as fabulous as the people's whose lives are on our scroll, then we feel even worse. And being just recognizing that feeling depressed is normal. It's human. It's part of all of the range of emotions. And it just is looking for it's a signal, like Carla is saying, it's a signal. It's telling you something important. And it's the same as fear, and it's the same as anxiety, and it's the same as our happy emotions, the ones we love. They're all telling us something important about ourselves. And so depression is not something to be like treated away instantaneously as if it's a bad thing that we have to tear out and burn and get rid of. Recognizing that it has a purpose, it is trying to guide us. This quality of the stop sign is so important, to recognize that sometimes it's keeping us from doing something that's not good for us. And that quality of soul guidance is something that I think that we should be focusing on a little bit, because I think that's really despair or depression is trying to tell us, we're going in the wrong direction here. There's something that needs to be adjusted in your life at this point.
Yeah. And another aspect of that is to exactly what you're saying. It's not something we need to just fix right away. Um, it, it, I think the idea of allowing is so healing. It's the hardest thing to do, but the most healing thing to do with all of the difficult emotions. And depression is one of those. There's a fear of, it's been so stigmatized in society, and it's very difficult to talk about, but it's something that happens to all of us. And there's more and more awareness now. But I would say that awareness is for the more severe cases. You want to make sure somebody is not going to harm themselves, of course. But there's so much more gray area between not being depressed and being suicidal. Like, there is just a huge, huge swath of area that is in the normal range. I guess to give it a little clinical wording. And what are some of those aspects that we might, look out for or be aware of when we're feeling blue?
Yeah. And I can't go past what you just said, because it is so common. Depression is so common. If you look at the figures of how many Americans are on antidepressants long term, it's a staggering number. And there don't seem to be enough possibilities for what to do with that expression of our soul experience. You go to the doctor and you say, I'm feeling depressed, and you get an antidepressant, and then you're just on that probably for a very long time, instead of, gosh, wouldn't that be great to explore that internally with a therapist, with a support group, with a whatever, and to start to look at it as a sign rather than as a problem to be medicated. And we're not going to be, we don't want anyone to hear what I'm saying and decide to just go off of meds or anything like that. That's not what we're saying, because that's something you have to do with your doctor. But what I just want to express is how common this is, and how this is a huge issue in culture, in people today. And what can we do to make our lives better, and hear this message that this stop sign is giving us, and what do we do to adjust it? And that gets into, like, is your work life supporting you mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and financially? Sometimes the work life is just about finances and it does nothing for your soul. It doesn't mean you go ahead and quit your job, but what are you doing to feed your soul? What are you doing to feed your purpose? Um, there's a lot of things that sometimes if we just go, okay, well, we'll just treat it, then we don't look at what's underneath that, what's actually being called for.
Absolutely. I see that some of the main aspects are that feeling of hopelessness or powerlessness, kind of that it's just a stuck feeling, a feeling of stuckness, like something's feeling crappy and I can't do anything about it. And so that over time will definitely naturally lead to those feelings. And some other aspects that I see related to these sort of stuck, depressed states, unworthiness, self blaming, discouragement, feeling alienated, either within a tight social group or in general as a whole from the world. So that feeling of loneliness. Another big one is that crisis of faith can be really depressing and put you in kind of a stuck place where you're not sure where you fit in the grand scheme of things. Um, Rumination, of course, that is something that's so common when something's weighing on the mind or the heart, and just general feelings of gloom. Also, deep despair, like soul angst, existential feelings of despair. And again, these are all things that we're all going to feel at some point in our lives.
And they're legitimate feelings. There's nothing inherently pathological about feeling grief over the state of the world, and the losses that we've all experienced in the last few years and over our lives. And it's perfectly normal to feel that way. There's nothing toxic about it. It's not something that you have to like manage into oblivion so that you can all of a sudden be joyous all the time. It's recognizing that these feelings are part of us. They flow through us, and the more that we're able to embrace them and allow them to flow and to listen to their messages, that's when they can release the hold. A lot of us haven't been emotionally educated. I mean, certainly I wasn't as a child to recognize that my emotions are telling me something. They're my friends and they're here to help. And to be able to hear the message and to be able to let the emotion flow through my body rather than to stop it, tamp it down. And that's something I like how you kind of talked about some of the topics that can bring up these feelings, because there are so many. But one of the things that I really see is that helplessness quality. And this is I want to weave in a little bit of the Chinese medicine perspective. The liver, the Chinese medicine liver, is the considered to be like the general of the body, and the liver is in charge of making plans and executing the plans, and like doing this 3D life thing. Like we're going to do this, we're going to set our eye at accomplishing this goal, and we're going to do it this way. It's very much into that. And what happens in a circumstance, if you're in a workspace where you don't have any ability to make the decisions that need to be made, when you don't have that agency of being able to express yourself and to being able to do the work that you can do and you want to do, and if you continually get sort of ground down by that system, it's going to impact the liver's quality of bringing that energy up and getting things done. And when we constantly have that downward pressure of somebody else or the circumstance controlling us and sort of squishing us down, that will come up as depression. That cycle will reinforce itself, and we will feel really, really depressed. And so I think that's one of the pieces that I'm looking at. If you lose your sense of agency and you lose your sense of hope, that it can end up in that depression. My favorite essence for this dynamic is wild oat. And wild oat is a really useful broad-based remedy that helps you kind of clear stuff out of the way so you can actually see what your purpose is. And that really fits in well with the liver dynamic of helping you direct your life.
That's really interesting to tie in that sense of purpose with the liver dynamic. I hadn't really thought about it that way before, but that sense of purpose is such a key in that really a will to live, like turning around that sort of apathy. And so another, I think, essence in that, and turning that around, would be the wild rose that Bach discovered, that flower essence. And also the California wild rose is also helpful in that regard. What do you think about those two?
Fully agree. I think wild rose, the Bach wild rose is usually my first go-to that I'm thinking of in this context. I think you can use either one, the one from FES, the California wild rose, or the Bach wild rose, but they are very different plants. And for me, I look at the signature of the plant particularly to help guide me in selection. And the wild rose that Bach made is the Rosa canina, which is also called a dog rose. And it forms these beautiful red hips, and it grows along roadsides. It grows rather wild, and it gets to be a nice big shrub, and that's quite different than the California wild rose, which is a little dude, sort of calf height or knee height maybe. And so there's a lot of interaction with the world growing on the roadsides as Bach's wild rose does, and it creates this quality. I feel that, like all the roses do, they speak to the heart, they speak to hope, they speak to openness and connection. But Bach's wild rose is very much that restoring of hope, that restoring of the heart forces that help us to go on. And I know that you like both of them, and use a variety of different roses in your practice as well.
Yeah, I do. And I agree that Bach rose is, that Rosa canina seems like a very, it's just has that history of that use, and is, there's a lot of strength in pulling you back to your heart center. And I do really appreciate that discovery by Dr. Bach. Um, so, there's so many directions we can go with this, but since we are, that feeling, that dark feeling, that heavy feeling, I know for me, when I'm feeling depressed for sort of an extended period of time, um, I can feel it start to spiral a little bit. You feel like you're going into a hole, and it's really hard to kind of get out of that hole, to feel like that weight lifting, and um and lightening up, so to speak. So there's a couple that I think are really a couple essences that I think are really important for this conversation. Um, and those have to do with, one is St. John's wort. um that is just, it's just a cornerstone essence for me and in my practice, to bring more light into our container, our body and our soul and our energy field. It's a very solar flower. And herbally, it's used for a multitude of uses, but the one that they've studied the most is for depression and depressed states. It acts in a similar way as some of the depression medications. It herbally, though, if you are considering using it, definitely be sure to work with a practitioner, because not, an herbal practitioner or a naturopathic doctor, because there are a lot of drug interactions that St. John's wort has, and it can speed up how long it takes for your body to process other medications and change the way that they, in a way that might not be beneficial. Um, so it's really interesting that the herbal use, though, for depression, I find the flower essence use also is so helpful, and it just works more on that energetic level. And I feel that infusion of light, filling up the structure. And in a way, I feel really held and contained by that light. It has this sort of soothing, um, nerve calming uh, action. And part of that too is promoting like trust in the world, because now that you're filled with light, there's more, you can trust what's around you and what's happening, and trust yourself. So it dissolves that that dark feeling where you're all alone and you can't trust anyone.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm really glad that you brought St. John's Wort into the conversation, because it's such an important um, essence for this particular topic. And I also love that. Well, I don't love the a few years back, it burst into the public awareness of, this is an herb, and I'm talking about the herb use, not the essence now. This is an herb that works on depression. It fixes depression. And so all of a sudden everybody starts taking it, and without the guidance, like you say, of a qualified or an herbalist who can teach you how not to take it or how to take it. And we saw all these sorts of reactions, and all of a sudden it gets painted with the broad brush of, like, A, it doesn't work, and B, it's dangerous. And it's so interesting that our mindset as Westerners is that we take something and it makes something go away. And if we have a circumstance like depression, or we're feeling that, we want something to make it go away. and I agree. I fall for that too. I would love for things to just go away myself. And also recognizing that it's telling you something. It's here to teach you something. And the essences, when we're using flower essences, they will help things to emerge in our awareness, so that we have the ability to make the changes that we can make, that we need to make. And it's not about making the depression go away per se. It's about uncovering what's underneath that, getting more clarity on our lives, getting more ability to flow with things. And then just your natural state is not that. And so recognizing that you're taking essences to help bring these awareness shifts, to bring them up and to bring them forward, so that we can feel better. It's not about the essences are going to make us feel better per se. Do you have another piece that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just exactly, I see the St. John's Wort essence as sort of a flashlight, like shining a light into all these like dark corners of the psyche. So, we naturally want to not look in the dark corners. We want to just like shut the door and go away. But I think that with this essence, it does it with in a nurturing way. So it's not like the floodlights are on. Oh my gosh, it just infuses that gentle infusion of warm light into the dark corners of the psyche, so that it's not so scary in there.
Yeah, it's a hand holding rather than a gripping you by the back of the head and facing you, sticking your head in it, like, look at this, isn't that horrible? Yeah, it's a good one to think about in this context. I would love to add that my next favorite essence to recommend to someone, which is very easy to deal with, it's Lighten Up. And that's the formula from the Alaskan essences. And they make it in drops and in a spray version. And they originally came up with it because living in Alaska, the seasonal affective issues are significant. When you live in a world that you might get a light for a couple hours of day, that is pretty intense to have to endure that much darkness and be able to keep your mood stable. So they know this very well. They know this topic very well, and Lighten Up was created for this purpose. And my favorite experience with Lighten Up, a client got in touch with me. Her husband had heart surgery, and he was depressed after his surgery and his medical event. And she kind of couldn't get him off the sofa, and he was just he was just spiraling, and it was very hard to see. And he wouldn't take essences. He didn't want to have anything to do with anything, and she just couldn't get him shifted. And I said, okay, let's try this. And I gave her some Lighten Up spray, and because that's okay to put it into the space. You can't put drops into his water if you didn't agree, but you can put it into the space. And so she would just mist the house a few times a day, and she the next I heard from her in a week or two was like everything had changed. Things were so much better. He had started to move around a little bit more and was starting to kind of be more himself again. And so you can do a lot of good with a spray like Lighten Up.
Yeah, that's a great way to use it too. One of my it contains several of the Alaskan essences and some of their gem elixirs and an environmental essence. So, but one of my favorite parts of that is the orange calcite gem elixir. And it's just such a joyful, warm, bright uh, stone that just infuses everything with like that golden, juicy light. You know, it reminds me of an orange, like, and that the smell of it even, and on a warm summer day, like it infuses that creativity too. So it warms everything up in order to open and to see the joy in what's happening in the world. I love it.
The gems are really an important addition to using flower essences. So I'm glad you wanted to highlight that. I created a formula called Despair from my Flora of Asia line. I try to, as part of my combination formulas, I kind of try to have formulas that address a lot of these situational and kind of common life experiences. And the Despair formula is for this, you know, hope, finding hope in the darkness is the subtitle that I wanted to encourage people to find. And one of my favorite essences in it for this topic, you know, of the depression is the Chinese Eminopterus. And the Eminopterus has this quality of shining a light in the darkness, of giving you not a flashlight, but like a guiding light to walk through a really dark and difficult time. And a lot of times when you are depressed, when you are having a hard time, it feels like the darkness is all around you. It feels like there's no way through. It feels like, you know, it's going to be like this forever. And the Chinese Eminopterus really helps you to gain a little perspective on it, be able to sort of see, okay, this is where I am, but it's not like this forever. And this is the way forward. I find it to be a really essential element of bringing people through and forward and out of this time of darkness and seeking.
It's a lovely combination, and it has some of the other Flora of Asia flowers that I'm learning to know more recently and love, like the wingthorn rose as well. So it's a really lovely combination. There's another one I want to make sure that we talk about, and that's red clover, the red clover flower essence. And the reason why I like to use it for some of these depressive states is it's such an alchemizer. It's such an essence of transmutation, and it takes these the lower vibrations. And the way that I experience red clover is that it's like it filters these experiences, and it doesn't its action isn't to remove the negative experience. It's to just filter it and remove negative remnants of the experience. So, um, and in that, so what's lower vibration, you know, and it kind of removes it from the body and helps us connect to the light. The reminder that it gives me is um, to view our experiences as what makes us complete and complex and beautiful. So it helps remove the shame around depression too, and so that we're not feeling like dirty or bogged down by what's happening, by whether it was an experience or even just the feeling of feeling depressed, because of the shame around that feeling. And red clover also is used in the herbal world as a what they used to call a cleaner, a blood cleanser, and it helps the body remove waste, the waste what doesn't belong. So it helps assimilate nutrients. It's fully packed with nutrients. It helps assimilate nutrients and then helps remove what we don't need. And I like to look at the flower essence the same way on an energetic level. And I just feel like it's just such a key, maybe often overlooked essence, for doing kind of that work, that alchemizing work in the body, helping you to do that work.
I'm intrigued by this additional use because I would have, so my first thinking on this topic of using red clover plus our topic of depression is the painful experience of being around somebody who's depressed. Red clover is such a good releaser of other people's energy. It helps us to be emotionally independent. One of the first things you think of red clover for is sort of mass hysteria, where if you're in an environment with other people who are freaking out, you're going to start freaking out too. And red clover helps you to create that, release that mass hysteria imprint of it impacting you. So I'm thinking even that it's useful because I'm sure a lot of the people listening to this are maybe not even depressed themselves, but are around somebody who's depressed. And it's really hard. It's really hard to live in an environment or to be, intimately connected, whether it's at work or wherever, with somebody who is depressed. It feels bad. It's not a good experience. And using red clover might be a good way of helping yourself, as maybe you can't help them, but you can help yourself not take on that experience that they're experiencing.
Yeah. And where it's so key right now is it's social media and news. And those are a huge cause of depression. I know they're a huge cause of my depression and when I feel low. The world events, the things that are going on in the world today, it's brutal. And so red clover, another, if you think about what we'd call a more known use of not getting affected by other people, well, that just extends in my mind to other people that you're seeing on a screen. It doesn't have to be people near you. So, and other events on a screen. So again, another one that, I think maybe we do a whole episode on managing social media with flower essences, because it seems to keep cropping up in these topics that we're talking about, of course. And it's big, it's just huge, it's in our psyche and our energy field. We're taking it in, maybe probably even more so than if we were in person at an event and seeing bad things happen. It's burning into our brains. And I think that the red clover, just again, it's transmuting, it's clearing that out so that you don't hold on to all the negative pieces of that information that you're experiencing or taking in.
Yeah, it's a complex, there's so many different moving parts here. And yeah, I think you're right. Having some sort of a conversation about the impacts of social media and media consumption, maybe in general, might be a worthwhile conversation. I'd want to, because you're starting to talk about that quality of the world impacting us. I want to bring mustard into the conversation because mustard, one of Bach's essences, is helpful for a depression that sets in very quickly. It can be very intense. The sort of the defining quality to mustard is it's sort of sudden onset. To me, I feel like, because I have the advantage of living in the country in an area where the mustard grows in the fields, and to see that in the wintertime, to see that just sulfur yellow blanket that covers the whole ground, you look at it and you're just like, oh, you feel so much better, everything's good. But there's that quality of at that time of year when it blooms, it can be really stormy. And so I kind of envision when that dense cloud goes over the sun and then everything goes gray. And then all of a sudden the sun comes out again, boom, everything's bright. And mustard has that quality where it's very easy to shift. It boom hits you, and then boom, you can shift it with the mustard. So that's one of the things I think of. And to add in, there's a wonderful formula for this issue called Illumina from the Flower Essence Society. It's one of their flourish formulas, and it includes mustard and also includes St. John's wort and a few other essences for the topic of depression.
Yeah, I always called it a lumen. That's funny. I didn't know.
I think they call it Illumina. I don't know. I think there's a little accent on the E, but I
Okay.
could just be making that up. It's totally
Okay.
possible,
Yeah.
whatever. We know what we're talking about. You just
Yeah.
get what you needed.
Right. Yeah, it's another good off the shelf formula with a few of the other essences like mustard, St. John's wort, borage, explorer's gentian, and pine. So the borage is a classic one for being heavy-hearted and kind of boosting that strength, that resilience, that heaviness of heart, courage, and so forth.
There are so many beautiful essences for this topic, and we could, we I think we're going to explore this further in further episodes. Is there one more essence that you just absolutely want to bring into the room here as we talk about this quality of the blues and depression?
Well, there's so many. um, the one that I've been experimenting with, I'll just tell you one that I've been experimenting with recently, and that's one of the research gem essences by Alaskan, and that's pink quartz. So as we know, rose quartz is sort of is one that's been around a long time and used for nurturing the heart space. And pink quartz is one that I've recently tried from them, and there's less literature on it since it is a research essence. But my personal experience with it is that it felt it's another one that felt like it really just cleared space in my heart chakra. It really just sort of swept. It was like a sweeping away of burdens that I was carrying in my heart. And it was a nice little profound experience that I had with it. So I definitely want to use it more and have more to report on it. But it has that just cleansing action in a very, very sweet and gentle, compassionate way. So I'm liking to think about it for not just emotional burdens that I might be carrying, but just that might be residing in me, even ancestrally, and doing work to clear away those burdens that aren't needed anymore. And this last fall, I've probably, I talked to you, Kathleen, about it. I definitely went through a little bit of depression with my own my own self, as we are talking about, and again, this is hard to talk about. It's hard to even admit it, and I'm trying to push the boundary here and say, yes, I've been feeling depressed for a couple months this year and was just feeling quite low. So using the flower essences, are part of that, and exploring some of these some of these flower essences that I hadn't used before, like the pink quartz. I feel like that one was a real game changer for me. So that's my report.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, isn't it the funniest thing? We have so much shame around feeling these emotions, about admitting that we're having a hard time. I've had that experience myself when I would be meeting some people that I know sort of as networking or business friends, and to say, oh, I'm really struggling this week. I'm really having a hard time. And sometimes it's so funny. They like, but you're the flower essence person. You're supposed to be like on top of it. What? No, it's because I need them so much, is that I work with flower essences. We don't have it all figured out. We feel these things too. but we do have some tools, and we love to share these tools because they have been, like you say, game changers for both of us in this experience that we call life. Both of us carry these experiences and struggles, and we get it. We've been there. We've walked this path, and we just like to be able to share with you what we've learned and the ways that we found our way through it. And the process is ongoing. We're always learning and growing and shifting. And we just wanted to share this with you today. This wonderful, exciting topic of depression. It'll show up in your feed, and everybody's like, "Yay, depression! What a fun episode that'll be!" But it's important, and it's something we all experience. And so it's our intention to bring a little light to it and a little bit of options for essences that you can try and see how they feel. And we'd love to hear your experiences with them. We love to hear back from our listeners. We love to hear what you're doing, and your requests and your questions and all that on social. You can watch us on YouTube. You can respond to us on the social channels. We love to hear back from you. And I'm hoping also that as you're listening, you're thinking, I know somebody who could really use the support of essences and would be benefited by listening to this episode. So why don't you share? Why don't you scroll down and share? And if while you're there, if you felt like offering a little review or some stars, that'd be pretty sweet too.
Yeah, and we love your feedback. Everybody is so individual, and that's what that's what fires me up as a flower essence practitioner is, no one ever, I never create the same combination for any client. It's always different and unique and individual, just as they are. So if you are a user of flower essences, it's great to share this information, what works for you and what your experience is, because this is actually a relatively new still field where we're all still learning and research. It's endless. It's an endless lifetime study, and it's another reason why we wanted to start this podcast and just start talking about it more, getting that information more out there in the public realm, and hearing how everybody else is using flower essences too. So if you want to help support us in this work, again, Patreon is a great way to do that. And if you have suggestions for future topics, we love to hear that too. So thank you again for listening, and thank you to our patrons for supporting this work.
Yeah, making it happen. Thanks, everyone. It's been really great spending time with you, and we look forward to talking to you again on the next podcast.
Bye-bye now.